At this point, you should have set up your Vagrant box. You should have set up AWS. So now we can launch our Kubernetes cluster using kops. Here I'm logged in to my Ubuntu Xenial box. Before setting up the cluster, you need to make sure that you have Cubectl installed as well. This URL you can find in the procedure document. You can just download it. You move it to user local bin, exactly where kops is as well, and you give it execution permissions. And then when you type Cubectl, you have Cubectl available. Before creating the cluster, you will also have to create new SSH keys. And those SSH keys will be used to log in to the cluster. SSH keygen can create new keys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new key in .ssh id RSA. And this public key, id RSA pub, will be uploaded to our instances. And that way we will be able to log in to our instances using our private key. So id RSA is our private key. This is our public key. Public key goes on the instance and we log in with the private key. And just one thing I want to do before I'm going to enter the kops command is I'm just going to rename the kops binary. I'm going to rename it in just kops rather than having kops Linux AMD 64. This is the kops command I'm going to execute. And this kops command is not going to do anything yet because it needs another step before it's really going to execute the commands on AWS. But this one is going to create one master, a T2 micro, and two nodes, also T2 micro. So we have kops create cluster, we give it a name. This needs to be the full DNS name of the cluster. I have Kubernetes New Tech Academy, the one that I set up in Route 53. I'm going to save the state in S3. This is my S3 bucket. And I'm going to launch it in the EU West 1A zone. You're probably going to use another zone. US East 1A, US West 1A, and so on. Node count is 2 and the node size is T2 micro. The master size is also T2 micro and the DNS zone is Kubernetes New Tech Academy. I'm going to execute this and then you will be able to preview the changes that will be made to AWS. So it's going to make auto-scaling groups for our nodes. It's going to launch a master. It's going to provision also SSD drives. And then if we want to really launch this cluster, then we can just do this with kops update cluster and then the name with -- yes. And then it's going to launch. If you want to make changes first, you can edit the cluster using kops edit cluster and then the name. But because the state is on S3, you also have to specify the state. So then the command will work and then you can still make some changes. I'm not going to make any changes at this point. I'm just going to launch the cluster. So I'm going to do kops update cluster and I'm going to specify yes. And again, I will specify the state. This will then launch the cluster. It will take a couple of minutes and then I can try to run one of the examples. So now the cluster has been created and let's have a look what this means. Road config for Kubernetes New Tech Academy in this file. I'm just going to get this file. And this is actually the certificates that we need and the password to log in to our new cluster. That's what kops configured already for us. So for instance, we have here the server HTTPS API Kubernetes New Tech Academy, and that's what we will be able to use. Let's see if the nodes are up. So Cubectl get node. 3 nodes in ready status, 1 master. This is going to be the master. It's in a different IP range. And then 2 nodes. Let's try to run something on this cluster. Let's try to run the same program, the hello minikube, that we tried with minikube. So we can see whether this also works. So first we do kubectl run hello minikube with the image, and we specify a port. Then it says deployment hello minikube created. Typically on AWS, when you want to access this service, we're going to put a load balancer in front, like an ELB, Elastic Load Balancer, a service that AWS provides. I'm going to explain this to you in the next lectures. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do expose deployment, just like we did with Minikube, and then I will have to open a port. What port we will be able to see using kubectl get service. So once this image is up, it gets assigned a port. So hello minikube is running and this port is now exposed. So if we want to access it directly without a load balancer, we have to open this port in the firewall. In VPC management console, so if you go from the home screen to VPC, and then you go to security groups, then you see the master's Kubernetes, and this is the one we're gonna edit. We're going to add another rule. This was the port. We're going to open this for everyone. I'm going to save this. So if you have a look at the EC2 services, these are the instances that are running now. If you take a look at Route 53, then you see we have API Kubernetes New Tech Academy. So we can use this to connect to our master node. So this is the only public IP that we can use now. So I'm going to try and connect to this host name on this port, and then you see we get the endpoint of this application. So the application is running, this port is now exposed, everything is working. This was just a test. In the next couple lectures you will see how to put this on a normal port, on a normal HTTP port for instance, using a load balancer. But for now this is enough to test our cluster. You can keep this cluster running, or if you want to make sure that you're not paying for these instances and these volumes here, like you have some volumes here, you have some instances here. If you want to make sure that you're not paying for them, then you can shut down your cluster again. And you can do that again using kops. You can use kops delete cluster name is the DNS name. It's going to then propose the resources it wants to delete. Like these are all the resources. If you agree with that, you can specify -- yes. And then it's going to delete all the resources. It's going to delete your cluster, IAM roles, VPC, everything that it's set up for you, it's going to delete again. So that was it. If you had any issues during this process, just use the Q&A, copy paste the error that you're getting, and I'm ready to help you. Otherwise, if everything is working, you can continue with the next lecture.